This is Andy Purewal for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. And for the first time, I am joined by Campbell Hatton over Zoom. Campbell, how are you? How's life?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. Just ready to get in the ring now. I could box tomorrow if I had the chance. So just excited to get going.
Well, it's good to hear kind of the excitement there and how prepared you are at this moment in time. Still a matter of about a month away from your pro debut. How have you found your first full professional camp so far, though?
Yeah, it's been really good. You hear a lot, like every fighter says the camp's gone perfect, but it literally has. I've not had any niggles, like not had any anything like setting me back. Everything's well ahead of schedule. So I really enjoyed it. It's been hard work, but yeah, I hope every camp's like this.
How do you find it? How different is it having this camp now as a professional in comparison to, before you made the decision to turn over?
Yeah, one thing I like with the professional side is when you've got that date to aim for, whereas in the amateurs you just got to stay ready, stay thereabouts, ready to box for pretty much the whole year, which gets hard because it means you've got to you've got to work your ass off, but you don't actually know what you're working for a lot of the time. You're just waiting for something to come up. But now I've got that date in my mind where I know exactly what I'm working towards. You can just plan everything. Everything just so much easier. You know exactly where you should be, what you need to be doing, and when. So that's been the main difference, really.
Campbell, we'll come on to kind of a fight day on March 6th and what you'd like to achieve, etc. in a little while, but just kind of get into that. Just take me back to the decision to turn professional at such a young age. How come you didn't decide to maybe stick around the amateur scene for a little while longer?
Yeah, well, it's a couple of things that made us turn over, really. I've got that professional style which has never really done me any favours in the amateurs. So we was always of the opinion that we want to turn professional as soon as we can, but make sure we are ready and we've got enough experience to turn over and impress people, not just turn over and get through it. So we ideally would have probably had another 6-12 months in the amateurs, but when COVID came along, it was sort of for the sake of a little bit longer in the amateurs or turn over and be active, because if we had stayed amateur, I don't think I'd be anywhere near fighting. It's just at a standstill in it. So we thought the time that we'd have had out outweighs the benefits of that extra 6 months. And I think we've been speaking, and as soon as we made the decision to turn pro, it was like a switch had been flipped, and it was just like that extra bit of motivation and everything that we was thinking needed correcting before we turned over. I'd started doing it really quickly. I just improved massively. I've probably improved more over the last, what will it be? Well, just short of 12 months from near the first lockdown. So I've probably improved more over this period of time than I have in the years in the amateurs.
Campbell, despite the experiences that your father's had as a pro and as a coach, and what your uncle has as your trainer now, and what he had as a fighter, with your own career now, how do you actually expect it to pan out without a huge amateur background? Do you expect it to be a long kind of process of fighting to gain experience up until a certain level, maybe 15 fights, 20 fights in? How do you actually expect it to play out?
Yeah, I had fair bit of experience, but I've not had the experience that you hear a lot of kids who've had 50 or 60. Like I had around 30 odd fights, so I am gonna be learning on the job, like in a way. So I think we don't want like any easy fights or anything like that. But I think it's just got to be smart with it. We want like we get the right fight, so where we'll be learning like in the right stages. So we'll take our time with things, and we won't be in any mad rush, because I have got like with the age I am. I'm only 20. I've got years to learn and work at me all my games. So yeah, we'll just take things slowly, bit by bit, and probably judging it each fight, where see how say obviously I've got my debut, see how I handle whatever the opponent, like we haven't got an opponent yet, but see how I do with that opponent, and then use that as a guide to what level the next opponent, just like doing it gradually, doing it smart.
You mentioned that you haven't got an opponent yet. Generally, at the beginning of a fighter's career, certainly for a debut, you'll either face somebody who's of a similar kind of standing to yourself, so just starting out, or somebody who's classed as a journeyman. What kind of way do you expect your debut to go? Do you expect to be in there with somebody who has that journeyman tag, or somebody who is maybe a little fresh off the scene themselves?
I don't know. I've got good people around me who will make that decision for me. But regardless of who they put me in with, I'll be ready. Like either way, my sparring. Like we've been really clever with it this camp. We've brought sparring partners. We've had good prospect, like up and comers, and really game lads. And I've mixed in with Jamie Quinn, who's probably one of the top journeymen in the country. So we're ready for like either of those.
Campbell is obviously well publicised. You train with your uncle Matthew, obviously your father's Ricky. We know Ricky's trained fighters in the past. How come you decided to train with your uncle as a pro instead of moving over, maybe training with your fathers? We've seen the dynamics with other past fighters up until a while now.
Yeah, there wasn't really. I was in a very lucky position where I trained with my amateur gym, and I was working with my dad, and I was working with Matthew. So, like either of them, I'm in good hands, and I'll still do work with my dad out of camp. Like obviously, in the weeks leading up to a fight, you don't want like two voices where things get confusing. But I still always do bits of work with my dad, and the main reason I did go with Matthew was I think just because over my amateur career I had done a little bit more work with Matthew than I did my dad, so I just think that's what sort of pushed me towards that. It was just less of a big change really. Just yeah, that was it. That was the only reason really.
What's your dad like in and around your camp then? Is he still very much trying to be as hands-on as possible, or does he leave Matthew to it? What's kind of his involvement from a physical aspect?
Yeah, we've got like the balance spot on really. Like you see with obviously different things work for different fighters. Like how you see Nigel and Conor Ben. Nigel's took a big step back, and he's letting him like find his own way, which is like really works for them. Then you see how Chris Eubank and the Eubanks are, and like there's quite a heavy involvement there, and like that's the way they choose to do things. And I think we've got somewhere in between really, where like in the camp, I will only work with Matthew, but we're still. I've been going sparring my dad's fighters, and I get all sorts of advice every time I see my dad. I'm getting advice, and Matthew's not stupid. Like I'd be silly not to be listening to the advice of my dad. So he is like fairly involved and gives me like a lot of good advice, and I'm learning a lot off my dad still. But we've just got the right balance, like I said before.
growing up with both Matthew and obviously your father Ricky Campbell, what was it like kind of watching their fights? Was you ever kind of old enough to tune in, or was you somebody who watched them back with them as you've gotten older? What was kind of their career influence over yourself?
Yeah, when there was boxing, I was a bit too young, really. Like I used to watch him in the gym, but I never went to any of the fights. And I never I was always a bit young to be staying up watching them on the telly as well. So it was more as I got older and as I got into the sport myself, where I started looking back at their careers, and that's when I started taking a bit of an interest a little bit more. Around the time of my dad's comeback fight, that was I was of an age then where I'd have probably been old enough to go, but just because of how I'd never been to any of the others, and I don't think it's nice to see a family to be there while a family member's getting punched. So that's why I was never really there. But after that, I was hooked by it.
I was going to say, what was kind of the initial thought for yourself that made you feel like, okay, I want to give boxing a go? When was it kind of when you first stepped into a gym, put on some gloves and just maybe hit the bag or did some pad work?
Yeah, I'd always done bits for as long as I can remember. Like I said, where I went in the gym to watch my dad and Matthew. I'd always have a little mess about myself on the bags and stuff like that. But it was when I got a bit older. It was just after my dad's comeback fight, where just because I was old enough to see the build up to it and actually know what's going on a bit more than any of his other fights. So that's where I started getting an interest, started doing a little bit more. Then he had a couple of years trying to convince my mum to let me go down to an amateur gym. And then just from there, really, it just took off and been obsessed ever since.
Talk about that, Campbell. You mentioned you had to kind of try to convince your mother a little bit. What's it kind of like having your father so supportive? We see, some relatives who are involved in boxing together, they go all the way. Others, they don't want to see their flesh, their blood getting into the ring. What was it like when you first started, boxing? Was your mother or your father even kind of against it, or was they always supportive of it?
Yeah, my mum was she weren't keen on it at all. To be honest, she didn't want me to do it just because obviously she's seen how hard it was, for my dad and Matthew, and she'd been around it, and not even just the obviously the danger side of it, just how hard it is, on the sacrifices you've got to make. I think that's one of the main reasons she'd have rather went into something else. There's easier ways to earn your money, isn't there? But my dad was it was a bit different, really. He never put me off it or was never against it, but he never encouraged me to do that. He just got behind whatever I did. In school, I'd try a bit of everything. So whatever I did, he just got behind me with that. He let me find what I want to do myself. So as soon as I said I wanted to give the boxing a go, he was right behind me straight away then.
Campbell, you come across as a very level-headed man. Despite the successes of what your father had and what your uncle had in the sport, what gives you the confidence and yourself the belief that if you can't necessarily emulate the successes they had, you can certainly reach the world scene that I know that is a target and a goal of yours?
Yeah, I've just from seeing how my dad and Matt trained over the years, I know no one trained harder than them two, and that's one area where I'm doing exactly the same myself. I train really hard. No one's working harder than me in the gym. So I think, and you see a lot of fighters with bags and bags and bags of talent who don't work hard and don't make it. And I really think you get what you put in. And I do think I've got quite a bit of talent myself. But that won't be the reason why I'll make it. It will be my work ethic in the gym.
Campbell, we briefly touched on kind of earlier on, like what was your earliest memories of seeing your family box? When you watch them now, do you watch back footage of your father, of your uncle fighting, and if so, do you kind of analyze it with them? Are you kind of critiquing them almost?
Yeah, definitely. I've got a lot of similarities to my dad and quite a lot to Matthew as well. I think in some ways, like I've got that come forward style and like the aggression like my dad had, and like all the work rate, the body shot. So I think I watch a lot of that to pick things up, and because obviously we're that similar, there's things I can look at. Oh, he did this, I'll give that a go, or he didn't do this, so I need to try and do it myself. Like works both ways, and also like with the defensive side, Matt had a really good defense through his career, so that's an area where I have been improving quite a lot with my defence now. So and I think that is down to working with Matthew and watching a lot of Matt's fights, because you don't just watch what's going well for you. You need to watch look for your weaknesses as well, don't you? More importantly than your strengths. And I think that's been a big thing for me, like picking up the defensive side as well.
When you do watch stuff back with them, what do Ricky or Matthew say when you kind of you critique maybe little mistakes that they made during fights?
Do you know what? They're quite they're really honest with it. They'll do it themselves. Like they'll point it out to me before I pull them on it, and I usually let them tell me before I tell them, so I don't get a crack or something.
Three fights I just want to touch on with kind of you with regards to your father. Just that night against Costa Zoo, I'm sure you'd have watched that back with him. What's kind of the reflections on that? And when you see the support that Manchester gave to your father, do you feel the pressure to try to have that a similar level of support given to yourself, or to try to grow that same type of affection with the Manchester fan base that your father had?
Yeah, like with that Costa Zoo fight, I think anyone who was there will tell you there's not much that comes close atmosphere wise, and there's no one who's had a following anywhere near like what my dad had. But I don't feel like a massive pressure to do it. I think it will just happen naturally. I think I've got an exciting, fan friendly style, and I think like the fans will just get behind me for a lot of the same reasons. Like I'm not an arrogant person, and I'm down to earth, and like I'm just doing the same things that a lot of the fans are doing most of the time. So I do think that the fans will really get on board, because anyone who's watched me fight in the amateurs will tell you that they'll get value for money anyway.
Another fight I just want to touch on is obviously the Floyd Mayweather one. Obviously, unfortunately for your father on the night, it didn't come together. But it's again just the support of having 20,000 Brits fly over, and only a portion and a fraction of them were able to get tickets on fight night. What do you kind of make of it as an experience hearing about from your dad and from your brother, from your dad's brother? Sorry.
Yeah, it was like that. It's crazy. I think there was about 20,000 at the weigh-in, which which had never been done before. So it just shows the love that people had for my dad to go over there in Mayweather's back garden and just sell the place out. I think he must have only had a couple of hundred people there, Mayweather. And it weren't my dad's night on that night, but just to be in the ring with someone of Floyd Mayweather's levels and achievement in itself, and that'd be a dream come true for me to get to the same sort of levels.
What do you make of it from just kind of when you analyse it, when you look back on that fight in particular? What do you make of it? A lot of people picked up on kind of the referee's involvement on the night, shall we say?
Yeah, funnily enough, me and my dad watched it the other day, and I think obviously at the end of the day, my dad will say the same. It's Floyd Mayweather, so it's not like he'd have definitely beat him with a different referee, because like what a fighter he is. But I definitely think it's a completely different fight with a different with a different referee, just completely took his game away. And I think he was definitely in with a shout. Early on, he was causing a lot of problems. He might not have affected the result at the end, but yeah, it was. You could see it as well from when my dad had the point took off. Like that was the beginning of the end, really. I do think he was stitched up by the referee, but sorry about that. If he was stitched up by the referee in that respect, but at the end of the day, it's still Floyd Mayweather, and I think for me, he's the best to have laced up gloves.
Final thought of your dad's career, I just want to touch on, is about the one with Manny Pacquiao. Just again, just reflecting on it for me, Campbell. I'm sure you've watched it numerous times with your father. What do you make of it all from your own perspective?
It's a very similar answer, really. With the Pacquiao fight, obviously there weren't like anything controversial on like a referee side or anything like that. But again, another modern great, Manny Pacquiao, and just to get in the ring with him against an achievement. But I think with that fight, it was just years and years of how he was out of the ring, maybe catching up with him. Like again, maybe not have affected the end result, but it was. I don't think that was the Ricky Hatton of years before, and I think like the Ricky Hatton who beat Costa Zoo, for me, I think could have possibly beat Pacquiao.
Campbell, you mentioned it there was kind of one of the influences over towards the end of your career, your father's career in particular, was how he was outside of a ring. Everybody knows that kind of in between fights, he'd maybe balloon up in weight and he'd like to kind of drink and what have you. How confident are you that maybe you won't become influenced by that side of life when you start to, especially when your name grows in boxing itself and when you kind of branch away from your father's name?
Yeah, I know I definitely won't be putting 3 stone on between fights because I'll get a good hiding anyway off my dad and Matthew. But I've got a lot of similarities to my dad. I like my takeaways and I do like the odd drink every now and then. But I've learned a lot from me. Like my dad's always said to me, "Do as I say, not as I do." So I think that's one way that I'll just think back. I don't fancy doing that. Like, I don't fancy ripping weight off because I hate dieting. So I'm just trying to make my job as easy as I can for myself. Try and keep on top of it as much as I can, but that is a struggle.
Campbell, what's your go-to cheat meal?
I like a Chinese, me. Like a Chinese. Not fussy though, to be honest. I'll eat anything.
Have you thought about kind of what you're going to do after the fight? I know you can't celebrate in normal services, but provided you do come away successful, have you thought about what you would like to do after the fight to try and celebrate it?
Yeah, it is a shame that I won't be able to meet up with all my mates or like get friends and family, have a big party. But them nights will come. We're just going to have to see. Really, it looks like it's going to be feet up with a takeaway. But I'd settle for that at the minute. I'm starving.
Rather you than me, Campbell. Obviously, we know about your coming in at super featherweight as well. Just kind of looking across that scene, what do you make of it domestically and then on the world level?
Yeah, well, at first we was hoping like super featherweight get matched around there, but I think really we'll match around there to start with. But my career, when I get to any sort of title level, will probably be around lightweight. I'd probably have to chop my leg off to get to 9-4. But yeah, so like lightweight's on fire at the minute. It's probably the best division in boxing. There's some top fights out there, so best get working in, Jim.
I was going to say, Campbell, it's a stacked division at world level. You've obviously got Teofimo Lopez, Gervonta Davis, Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia. Vasyl Lomachenko. I'm trying to think if there's anybody I've missed out, but it is stacked with fighters. But
Yeah.
just looking at it at the world scene, if you could pick 2 fighters to face each other now, who and why?
I like. There's loads, isn't there? It's hard to pick just one. I really like that Teofimo Lopez, though. I think he's a welterweight. On the night, he's a top fighter. I think he's got the lot. So him against, I like Devin Haney as well. So those two up against each other, I think is a good fight. Javonte Davis. I'm going to end up listing them all anyway. So I'm going to go with that one. Devin Haney and Lopez. I think that's a really good fight.
One of the other names is Ryan Garcia. He's been spoken about of potentially facing the past opponent of your father's, Manny Pacquiao. Not quite sure whether it'd be an exhibition or not, but let's say if a fight was secured between the pair of them. Oh, I've lost you for a second, Campbell. Yeah, Campbell, just picking that one back up there. As I was saying, Ryan Garcia potentially facing an opponent of your father's in Manny Pacquiao, whether it be an exhibition or not, is still unclear. But if a fight was agreed between the pair of them, what are your thoughts, Ryan Garcia versus Manny Pacquiao?
I think it's a good fight, me. I hope it isn't an exhibition. I just don't see any need for it. Obviously, you have got that difference in weight. Like Manny's been around welterweight for the time being, like from recently. But I do think he'd probably be able to come down. Like we've seen the weights that he's boxed at over the years. He'd probably get a bit lighter than welterweight. Ryan Garcia is a massive lightweight. I remember like building up to the Luke Campbell fight. I always thought that Luke could be a bit bigger just because of how tall he is at lightweight himself. But then Ryan ended up bigger, looked bigger on the night. So he's a massive lightweight. So I don't like if they can meet somewhere in the middle. I think that's a top fight. I don't think it needs to be an exhibition. You've got the experience, and he's still a force, Pacquiao. And like you've seen in his last fight, he's not been as active as Garcia, but like he's still a force. But then you've got Garcia's the fresher, he's the up and comer, he's hungry. So I wouldn't like to pick a winner with that one, really.
If I had to make you pick,
probably lean towards Pacquiao. Because he will be like the naturally bigger guy and you can match him for speed. You don't get any faster than Manny Pacquiao. So, yeah, probably lean towards Manny, use that experience.
Campbell, how much boxing, kind of current boxing that is, do you tend to watch, whether it be on your own or with your family? You know, do you tune in every Friday or Saturday night to watch whatever show's on, or do you take it as they come?
Yeah, I watch most of them, really. Definitely the British fighters. I'll watch pretty much all of them. And then I do like to watch like anything I can, really. Canelo Alvarez, my favourite.
I'm sure your uncle's pleased to hear
like
that.
To watch him. I know, yeah. Still on 2 paracetamol a day, Matt. But yeah, what a top fighter he is. I think he's a good fighter for me to watch because obviously I'm a come forward, aggressive fighter and naturally strong. But like if you watch Alvarez, he comes forward, but he's not just walking forward. He's like everything's calculated, and he's clever as well. So he's someone who I like to try and pick a few things up from.
Campbell, just touching on Canelo there then, there's a lot of talk at the minute that he'll be facing Billy Joe on May 5th, provided Canelo overcomes Avni Yildirim on February 27th. Just your thoughts if or when that's rubber stamped and secured, Canelo versus Billy Joe?
I think that Billy Joe will cause him nightmares early. I think like with the style wise, like stylistically, like he's always on the move. And he likes to throw combinations, Canelo. And I don't think Billy Joe will be there a lot of the time for him to be landing his, like sometimes you watch him, he'll throw about 4 or 5, 6 shots. And I think with his movement, a lot of the time he won't be there. But I just think he's that clever. Alvarez, he'll adapt. And like he find a way. I think it'll be a lot like the Amir Khan fight, where Khan was doing really well early and had that success, probably winning on points. But he's just that clever. He finds a way, and I think it'll be a similar sort of thing. But I do like Billy Joe. Like, I know Alvarez is my favourite, but I'd love him to beat him. Bring the belt back to Britain, innit?
Right, Campbell, we will leave that there now, and I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your day. But as a lot to do with everybody, I'm going to leave a final word to yourself for everybody who's going to tune in and watch your professional debut on March 6th, for everybody who's going to follow your career from this point onwards. What would you like to say to them?
Just be ready, because it's going to be exciting. And like, there's one thing, like anyone's always said about me, like, I'm never in a bad fight. So it's definitely going to be exciting.
Campbell, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you and speak to you for the first time. I'll make sure it is not the last. Enjoy the rest of your camp and your dieting. I think I'm going to go and eat a Chinese now.
Don't enjoy it too much. Nice one, pal.
Thank you.